We're now going to spend a little bit of time writing some tests for the sign up and sign in form. We're also going to see how you can use site intercept to handle network requests and API calls during component tests. If we have a look at sign up and sign in, they are both very similar. There's a little bit of a bug in this application. At the moment when you sign up, there is this validation, which does make sense. I'm also applying the same validation when you sign in, and this doesn't make any sense at all, but it does make for a good example of test, so I'm going to leave it like that for now. However, this is quite silly. You should not be showing these errors when you're trying to sign in, only when you're trying to sign up. Either way, let's take a look at the components. This is the sign in form. You can see the template is very simple. It just uses the user form and then it responds to a submit event. Sign up is very similar. It also uses the same component and responds to it in the same way. And this is why I have the validation on both of those components. I haven't got any way to turn it off. Definitely a feature improvement we could make. Either way, we're going to start by writing a test for the sign in form. I'm probably going to use sign up as an end-to-end test since it's going to give us coverage throughout the entire authentication workflow. Just to save a little bit of time, I already created a test file. It's just basically importing the component and rendering it. If we head over to our application and run that, we can see this is actually executing correctly, which is pretty nice. Let's go ahead and have a little think about how we're going to test this. I'd like to make sure my validation is working correctly. I'd like to make sure you cannot submit this when it's not correctly validated. And I'd like to make sure that when you do submit it, we're going to handle the network request correctly. Let's start off with the validation. Again, if we want to know how to select an input, I can use the select a playground and click on this. We're going to use site.get username. Seems like a good place to start. I'm also going to use as to alias this. I'll talk about aliases in just a moment. And then we're going to go ahead and clear them just to make sure we have a nice clean slate to work on. I'm going to do the same for the password field. We should then have 2 errors, so I'm going to go ahead and write an assertion to that meaning. We're going to look for a role equals alert. Remember, we created this earlier. And then we're going to assert that there are 2. So it should have a length of 2. Have length, and that is going to be 2. Let's save it and see what happens. This is passing, which is exactly what I was expecting. Let's actually make sure it fails for the right reasons. I'm going to say site.get, and we're going to use our alias username up here, and this is how you can access it. Then I'm going to type in here, and I'm going to type a username. This should now fail because I'm only going to have 1 error, and this is failing for the right reasons. What I'm going to do is go ahead and fill out both of these fields. They should have the correct validation. So let's go ahead and make both of these a little bit longer, but not correct length. If we save this off, we should still have 2 errors, but they're going to be slightly different, which is exactly what I was expecting. Let's go ahead and write those correct assertions. The first one is going to contain a certain text, which is going to be this field must be between 5 and 10, and that should hopefully be passing. Let's go ahead and just fix that one up and save it off. And this is in fact going to pass. The next assertion is going to be fairly similar. It's going to be between 10 and 40. So let's go ahead and update that. And this is going to pass as well. Finally, let's go ahead and actually fill this one out correctly. I'm going to put in my name and a password that is just long enough. And this should now have no errors. Let's go ahead now and write our assertion. We can do exactly the same thing as before, but it's going to have a length of 0. This one is going to pass as well, and the button is now enabled. The next thing I'm going to do is write the test for the submit button, both before and after. That is going to be fairly easy. We can go ahead and do that here, site.get. I'm going to go ahead and grab the button, and that one is going to contain submit, and we're going to use another alias here for submit. And then we're going to assert that it's disabled, so I can say should be disabled. This should hopefully pass again. Let's give it a try, and that one is going to pass. The next thing we're going to do is the same thing, but we're going to reverse the condition. I can also simplify this by using my alias to submit, and then we're going to say it should not be disabled. Again, this should pass, and it does. Finally, we're going to intercept the request when we click on this button, wait for the intercepted request to finish. We're going to force it to 401, so it's going to fail, and then we're going to get an error. That's fairly easy to do. I can say site intercept, and I happen to know off the top of my head, it's going to query API/login because I wrote this code. Just to show you how it works, let's go ahead and see it. It's over here inside of the sign up form. It's going to respond to the submit event with handle sign in, and then we're going to call API login. We are going to intercept this and return a 401, and it's going to show us this error. Let's go ahead and give that a try. We can say status code is going to be 401, and that should actually be enough. We can also use alias on this. I'm going to alias this one to submit, or actually I'm going to alias it to log in. We're then going to say sci.wait, and we're going to wait for this one to finish. It's obviously not going to finish until we actually submit the button, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to say sci.get at submit using my alias again, and then click on that button. Save it off, and this should hopefully still be passing, and we are getting the correct error down here. Finally, let's go ahead and finish this one off with one more assertion. This should have the correct text, and in this case we're just going to use contains and pass in that error message. Hopefully this is going to pass. It looks like I didn't copy that correctly. Give it one more try, save it off, and with a bit of luck everything is going to work correctly. Apparently it is not. We're actually getting a failure here. I think I've made a mistake. Username or password was incorrect. Is that what it's failing on? Interesting. I guess this is not using the alert selector. Lucky we're using this. We can go ahead and fix that one up right now. I'm going to head over to sign up form and see if we can figure out where this error is rendered. If I scroll right down the bottom, here is the error, and as expected, it does not have the correct role. Let's go ahead and fix that. A little bit of test-driven development for you. There we go. Everything is working, which is really good. I'm glad I caught that, and I'm starting to see the benefit of using these accessibility selectors. Either way, this is a fairly simple test, but we did cover quite a bit of content. We saw how to use the selector playground. We are using the roles, which is a good practice to be in. We used aliases heavily to make our tests more readable, and we also used site intercept to force a 401. We are going to more expressively test our authentication workflow, but I am going to leave that one as an end-to-end test, and we'll come back to that in a later lecture.